If you really look at the landscape of modern superhero cinema right now, it really feels like everyone gets a kingdom.
Oh, absolutely. Like everybody gets their own spotlight.
Right. Almost every major character. And honestly, at this point, even like the secondary ones who maybe only had a couple of lines in a team-up movie, they all get their own standalone blockbuster. Or, a sprawling multi-season television series.
Yeah, it's pretty much become the standard operating procedure for the industry. You build this massive universe, right? But you give every individual hero their own specific franchise so you can, flesh out their personal storylines.
Exactly. You have Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and just this seemingly endless parade of side characters getting their own dedicated real estate. Which brings us to a massive, glaring anomaly.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right, because you have one of the most iconic, globally recognized characters of all time. I mean, a literal household name, someone you can recognize by their silhouette alone. And yet he is permanently stuck playing a supporting role. I'm talking about the Hulk.
Yeah, the Hulk.
Why is a character with such massive, undeniable popularity treated like a perennial sidekick?
That is the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have this giant green rage monster who is universally loved, but he is perpetually relegated to, basically crashing on the couches of other superheroes movies.
Crashing on their couches, exactly. It's so weird.
It is. And the reason why he doesn't have a modern movie franchise, it isn't just about like bad scripts or casting choices. It is a literal masterclass in the business of Hollywood.
Well, if you're the kind of person who loves looking behind the curtain to understand why things are the way they are, you are in the right place. Today, for our deep dive, we are going to unpack this strange, decades-long saga of the Hulk.
It is a wild ride, for sure.
It really is. Based on the fascinating material we're diving into today, we are talking creative misfires, massive clashes of ego, and the bizarre legal loopholes that trap this character in cinematic purgatory.
And we're going to break down the intersection of art, technology, and, frankly, corporate warfare, but without drowning you in legal jargon.
Please, no legal jargon. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, to really grasp the modern cinematic failures, we have to start at the foundation. We need to look at what makes the Hulk fundamentally different from almost every other hero out there, going all the way back to his creation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the Hulk goes way back, right? Like 1962.
Yeah, 1962. Created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Right, and their goal was to kind of put a twist on the classic Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde tropes. They wanted a monster who was secretly a good guy. But the wildest piece of trivia from the material about his origin is that the Hulk was originally gray.
He was. He was totally gray. And, the shift to green had absolutely nothing to do with, like, a creative epiphany or anything.
Wait, really? It wasn't an artistic choice?
Not at all. It was a purely pragmatic decision based on the technology of the early 1960s. The printing presses at the time, they simply couldn't maintain a consistent shade of gray from panel to panel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so depending on the ink levels, he would look silver in one frame and then almost charcoal black in the next one.
I mean, that would be incredibly confusing for a reader trying to follow a visual medium.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So to solve a literal mechanical issue with the printing press, they just changed him to green because green was much easier to print consistently.
That's amazing. A simple practical fix ended up creating one of the most iconic and recognizable character designs in pop culture history. A literal printing error birthed the Jolly Green Giant of comics.
Exactly. But, setting his color aside, the core concept of Bruce Banner is what really separates him from the pack. I mean, think about Superman or Spider-Man.
Right.
For them, their abilities are viewed as a responsibility or a tool they can use to impose their will on the world and help people.
Yeah, they are essentially embracing their power to solve external problems. But for Bruce Banner, his powers are a curse. I mean, he's a brilliant scientist accidentally exposed to gamma radiation, and now whenever his heart rate spikes...
Whenever he is angry or stressed.
Yeah, exactly. He turns into this uncontrollable force of nature. He doesn't want to save the world or fight crime. His power actively destroys his personal life. To put an analogy on it, think of traditional superheroes as elite athletes who are, training to win gold.
Right.
The Hulk, on the other hand, is like someone trying to contain a highly contagious, dangerous disease. He's not training, he's quarantining.
That is a perfect analogy. And that exact psychology is what made him such a massive success when he transitioned to television.
Oh, the 70s show?
Yeah, the 1977 and 1982 TV series, The Incredible Hulk, starring Bill Bixby. It leaned entirely into that tragedy.
It really did.
It framed him as this lonely fugitive. He was constantly moving from town to town, helping people out of necessity, sure, but his primary motivation was always searching for a cure.
Right. It completely stripped away all the cosmic alien fighting comic book elements and just focused on a deeply empathetic story of a man running from himself.
Exactly.
But okay, I am trying to wrap my head around the timeline here. Because if that TV show was a colossal, undeniable hit in the late 70s and early 80s,
And it was a huge hit.
then why did the leap to the big screen immediately hit a brick wall? I know from the material we reviewed that they tried to launch a standalone movie in 1990. Why didn't that happen?
It basically comes down to the brutal reality of physical and financial limitations. In 1990, they were actively developing a standalone film, and rumor has it they were actually eyeing Johnny Depp for the lead role.
Johnny Depp. Wow, that would have been wild.
Right, but the leap from television to cinema is vast.
Yeah.
On a small, low-resolution television screen, you can use clever camera angles and, bodybuilders feed it green, like Lou Ferrigno, to make the Hulk look imposing.
I imagine that trick does not hold up when you blow the image up to a 40-foot cinema screen.
Not at all. On a massive screen, the audience can see every single detail. A painted bodybuilder just looks like, well, a man in makeup.
Yeah.
To do the character justice in a feature film, he needed to be a towering, unstoppably massive giant. And the only way to achieve that scale and maintain realism was through computer-generated imagery. But in 1990, CGI was nowhere near advanced enough to create a believable, emoting, photorealistic main character.
And the financial side of that equation must have been terrifying for a studio. I understand the projected budget for that 1990 movie was around $100 million.
Yeah, and in $1990, that figure is astronomical. To put that into perspective, the studios were basically being asked to spend an unprecedented amount of money on an unproven, technologically risky property.
Right, you'd be betting the entire studio on computers rendering a giant green man.
Exactly, just hoping audiences wouldn't laugh at it. No rational executive was going to greenlight that. The technology simply couldn't support the ambition, so the project just collapsed.
So the character basically just sits on the shelf waiting for the technology to catch up, and it finally does in the early 2000s. We enter the golden age of modern superhero movies. Universal Pictures, who holds the rights, decides it's time to bring the Hulk to the box office.
Right, for the 2003 film?
Yeah. And they hire Ang Lee, the director of Sense and Sensibility and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Talk about a massive pivot.
It was a drastic shift in tone. Because the technology couldn't handle the action in 1990, Universal swung the pendulum entirely in the opposite direction for 2003. They didn't want to make a standard action blockbuster. Ang Lee approached the material as a deep, agonizing psychological drama.
He really did. The movie spends its entire first half meticulously building backstory. There is no traditional supervillain for the Hulk to fight.
Not at all.
Ang Lee focused heavily on repressed trauma, childhood abuse, and this incredibly dark narrative of a father experimenting on his own son. They cast Eric Bana, who played Bruce Banner, as this quiet, deeply internal, almost emotionally paralyzed character.
Yeah, he completely lacked that explosive action star charisma you usually see in summer blockbusters.
Because the entire premise of the movie was internal. In Ang Lee's vision, the gamma bomb explosion didn't just create a monster out of thin air, it activated the deep genetic trauma that Banner's father had already inflicted upon him. The Hulk was a literal physical manifestation of emotional repression.
Which is brilliant on an artistic level.
Right. But wait, let me stop you there and push back on this premise. Because if you look at the movie landscape today, audiences absolutely devour dark psychological superhero movies.
That is true.
You look at the massive success of The Dark Knight or Joker or The Batman, people love gritty character studies. Why did this 2003 Hulk movie fail so spectacularly if audiences actually enjoy that kind of depth?
But what's fascinating here is the total disconnect between marketing, timing, and fundamental audience expectations. You have to remember the context of 2003.
Okay, set the scene.
Families and comic book fans were going to the theater right on the heels of the vibrant, fun, action-packed Spider-Man and X-Men movies.
Yeah.
They fully expected to see a giant green monster smashing tanks and throwing cars.
Right. They bought a ticket for a roller coaster, and Ang Lee locked them in a room for a 2-hour slow burn therapy session about daddy issues.
Precisely. The audience felt completely betrayed by the tone. The audience score settled at a dismal 29%. And, when word of mouth is that toxic, the financial reality becomes brutal very quickly.
Let's talk about those numbers, actually, because I think a lot of people misunderstand box office success. The 2003 movie cost $140 million to make, and it grossed about $245 million worldwide.
Right.
Now, you might hear $245 million and think, hey, that's a huge hit. They made $100 million in profit. Can you break down why that is actually considered a financial disaster?
Yeah, it is a really common misconception. When a movie grosses $245 million at the box office, the studio doesn't keep all of that money. The movie theaters generally take roughly half of all ticket sales.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, roughly half. So immediately, the studio's take is cut down to about $122 million.
Which doesn't even cover the $140 million production budget.
Exactly. And it gets worse, because that $140 million budget only covers the cost of making the film. It does not include the tens of millions of dollars the studio spends on global marketing, television commercials, and premiere events.
So they were deeply in the red.
Very deeply. The general rule of thumb in Hollywood is that a movie needs to make at least double its production budget just to break even.
So by that math, the 2003 film bled money. And that failure essentially killed any plans for a sequel under Universal's direct control.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting in the material. Universal's failure opened a completely new door. A few years later, Marvel Studios is forming. They are gearing up to launch their own interconnected cinematic universe in 2008, starting with Iron Man.
Like the dawn of the MCU.
And they want a do-over for the Hulk alongside it. So they cast Edward Norton.
Which, on paper, casting Edward Norton in 2008's The Incredible Hulk looked like a brilliant move. He's a lifelong fan of the character. He was a highly respected, Academy Award-nominated actor known for playing intense characters with dual personalities.
Think Fight Club.
Exactly, Fight Club.
But this casting choice led to one of the most legendary clashes of ego in modern Hollywood, because Norton wasn't content just saying his lines right.
Not at all.
Marvel allowed him to contribute to the script, and he took that inch and ran a mile. He was reportedly rewriting the script daily, sometimes handing out completely new pages to the crew right before they started shooting a scene.
Yeah, the conflict rooted itself in a massive difference in vision. Norton wanted to create a dark, complex, serialized epic. He essentially wanted to do for the Hulk what Christopher Nolan was doing for Batman. He wanted a gritty, uncompromising character study.
But Marvel didn't want a gritty character study. They were building a massive, interconnected brand. They needed a light, accessible, family-friendly commercial blockbuster that would fit neatly into the Avengers universe they were meticulously planning.
Right.
It is like Marvel wanted to open a highly efficient, massively popular, crowd-pleasing fast food franchise, and Edward Norton was standing in the middle of it, trying to run a Michelin-star kitchen, screaming that the burgers needed truffle oil.
That is a hilarious way to put it, but it's completely accurate.
Yeah.
And that tension eventually exploded in the editing room.
Oh, boy.
Marvel, as the studio funding the project, ultimately took control of the final cut. They heavily edited the film, removing many of the deep, dialogue-heavy, character-driven scenes that Norton had written and fought for.
And they did it without consulting him, didn't they?
Without consulting him or the director. They hacked it up to make it faster, punchier, and more commercial.
Which means the resulting film is just a really messy compromise. It doesn't have the deep art house vibe Norton wanted, but it also lacks the pure, unadulterated fun that Marvel wanted.
Yeah, it's stuck in the middle.
And the fallout from that editing room battle was incredibly public. Edward Norton essentially refused to promote the film. I mean, when the star of a $150 million summer tentpole refuses to do press, that is a declaration of war.
It absolutely is. And Marvel retaliated in kind. Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, publicly fired Norton before production began on the 2012 Avengers movie.
Wow, publicly fired.
Yeah, he released a statement saying they needed an actor who embodied the creativity and collaborative spirit of their other cast members. He basically branded Norton as impossible to work with in front of the entire industry.
Ouch. And Norton's camp fired back, claiming it was just a dispute over money and that Marvel was smearing his reputation to cover up their penny pinching.
It was a total PR nightmare.
But it left Marvel in a very tight spot. They are about to film the Avengers. They absolutely need the Hulk. But they need an actor who isn't going to try to hijack the production or demand complete creative control. So they bring in Mark Ruffalo.
And Mark Ruffalo accidentally revealed the absolute secret to making the Hulk work on the big screen.
Which is?
He functions best as a sidekick, not a leading man.
Ah.
Ruffalo is a phenomenal actor, but he truly shines in ensemble pieces. He didn't come in with the ego of trying to carry an entire franchise on his back.
Right. He allowed Bruce Banner to just be a piece of a larger puzzle. You didn't have to spend 2 hours watching him mope about his tragic childhood. You just got the incredible payoff of him turning green and punching an alien spaceship out of the sky when the team needed it most.
Exactly.
He became the unpredictable wild card, and audiences loved it.
It completely secured the character's legacy. But, it also highlights the most frustrating reality for the fans today. Mark Ruffalo wants to do a solo Hulk movie. The fans are begging for one. But Ruffalo himself has admitted that a standalone Hulk film will never, ever happen.
So what does this all mean? Are these mega corporations really just playing a massive game of chicken while the fans lose out? I need you to explain why a solo movie is legally impossible despite the character's massive success.
Okay, so to understand the legal trap, we have to look back at the 1996 Marvel bankruptcy.
Wait, bankruptcy?
Yeah, in the 90s, the comic book speculation bubble completely burst. Sales plummeted, and Marvel literally filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Yeah.
They were desperate for immediate cash injections just to keep the lights on and pay their staff.
So when a company needs cash fast, they sell their most valuable assets.
Exactly. Marvel started carving up their character library and selling off the film rights to various movie studios.
Right. So that is why, for decades, Spider-Man belonged entirely to Sony Pictures.
Yep.
It's why the X-Men were owned by Fox, and it's why the rights to the Hulk were sold to Universal Pictures. Now, over the years, as Disney purchased Marvel and built this massive empire, they managed to negotiate for, or flat out buy back, many of those rights.
They did. But the Hulk situation is uniquely complicated because of how the rights were split.
Break down that split for me, because this is the knot that no one seems to be able to untie.
So currently, Disney and Marvel hold the production rights for the Hulk.
Okay, production rights.
That means they are legally allowed to hire the writers, cast the actors, and shoot a standalone Hulk movie. However, Universal still holds the distribution rights in perpetuity for any standalone Hulk film.
And distribution is a massive part of the puzzle. The distributor is the one who puts the movie in theaters, handles the marketing, and takes a significant cut of the box office profits.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes a story of pure corporate ego and leverage. Disney refuses to spend $200 million doing all the heavy lifting.
Writing, shooting, and producing a massive blockbuster.
Exactly. Just to hand the finished product over to their direct rival, Universal, so Universal can distribute it and take a massive slice of the profit.
I mean, Disney doesn't need to do that. They have a dozen other billion-dollar franchises that they own completely. They have no incentive to share.
And on the flip side, Universal refuses to sell the distribution rights back to Disney. They have a valuable asset, and they have no reason to give it up for free, or even for a moderate price.
They're just sitting on it.
They're holding out, and Disney refuses to pay their ransom.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate corporate stalemate. Neither side will blink because neither side is desperate enough to compromise.
But Marvel still wants to use the character because he sells toys and puts people in seats. So they found a brilliant, highly calculated legal loophole.
A very clever one.
As long as the movie isn't a standalone Hulk film, as long as his name isn't the main title on the poster, they can use him.
Yeah, they can legally stick him into other heroes' movies as a supporting character without triggering Universal's distribution rights. So he shows up as a co-star in a Thor movie. Or, in the Avengers ensembles.
Or they pivot to television spinoffs because television falls under an entirely different set of contractual rules. Which brings us to the recent She-Hulk series.
Right, She-Hulk.
Now, the material we're looking at today notes that critics point out the She-Hulk series was a critical misfire. The argument is that by pivoting to a comedic, legal sitcom tone, the creators completely abandoned the underlying tragedy that makes the Hulk mythos so compelling, which alienated a lot of viewers.
That's certainly the critique outlined in our sources, yeah.
But, regardless of anyone's opinion on the quality of that specific show, it perfectly illustrates the extreme lengths Marvel is forced to go to. They're literally creating entirely new spin-off characters and shifting mediums just to do something Hulk adjacent.
All because the main character is locked up in red tape. It proves that in Hollywood, corporate leverage will always trump creative potential.
It's kind of wild to think about.
It is. You have two multi-billion-dollar entities who would rather let a highly lucrative standalone film property gather dust than give their rival a perceived victory.
Which is just wild when you step back and look at the whole picture. So let's distill this entire journey.
Okay, let's do it.
The Hulk, this absolute titan of pop culture, has been trapped in a cinematic cage for decades. First, that cage was forged by the technological limits of the 90s, where computers simply couldn't bring the character to life without bankrupting a studio.
Right.
Then, the cage was reinforced by massive creative disagreements with visionary directors and stars like Edward Norton, who wanted deep art while the studio demanded light commerce. And finally, the door to that cage was locked by an unbreakable corporate stalemate between two rival studios who absolutely refused to share the pie.
That is the harsh reality of the entertainment business. So, the next time you're sitting in a movie theater and you see the Hulk popping up randomly to help out Captain America or Thor or whoever is headlining the film,
you will know exactly why he is there.
Yeah.
It is not just a fun, creative crossover to make the fans happy. You are watching a live-action contract dispute play out with CGI punches.
It really is a brilliant legal loophole designed to avoid paying a rival studio.
It certainly changes the way you look at the entire cinematic universe. You start seeing the legal contracts behind the superpowers.
It changes everything.
It really does. And it leaves me with this final thought for you to mull over. We talked at the very beginning about Bruce Banner's core tragedy.
Right, the curse.
His entire existence is defined by the agonizing fact that he is trapped with a massive green monster that he absolutely cannot control. But when you look at the real-world history we just uncovered, isn't it perfectly darkly ironic?
How so?
The character of the Hulk is now suffering that exact same fate in the real world. He is trapped inside a massive, unstoppable corporate machine that no single creator has the power to control.
Wow. Yeah, he has become a captive to the very system that created him.
He really has. The legal red tape of Hollywood might be incredibly tangled, but the picture it paints is definitely clear. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.